and preparations for the presidential election, which is due on 4th of December 2021. This meeting also helps to identify entry points for future PBC engagement and discuss ways to support the implementation of the TRRC recommendations once finalized and presented to the government. Before handing over to our distinguished briefers, I wish to share the following points. First, the Gambia has been one of the success stories of the PBC flexible engagement, and the PBC stands ready to continue to mobilize the required international attention and support for its national peace-building priorities, particularly in the context of the ongoing preparations for the Gambia's 2021-2023 electoral process. In this regard, I wish to recall the briefing note circulated by my predecessor, Ambassador Mohammed Idris, in May and June 2021, which contains the Gambia's critical priority gaps in funding for the 2021-2023 electoral process. As chair of the PBC, I continue to call upon all the distinguished partners to cover these gaps and fulfill the Gambia's needs during this critical juncture. Secondly, there is a notable progress made in key peace-building areas, particularly transitional justice, with the establishment of the Truth, Reconciliation and Reparations Commission, TRRC, to ensure national reconciliation and justice as a basis for an inclusive and prosperous future. In this connection, we look forward to the finalization of its report. We need to rally coherent international support for the implementation process of the TRRC recommendations when finalized and for longer-term peace-building priorities of the Gambia. Allow me to add in my national capacity that Egypt reiterates its continued and unwavering commitment to support and accompany the sisterly Gambia in its path towards sustainable development and lasting peace, including through bilateral channels, technical support and capacity building programs by the Egyptian Agency for Partnership and Development, EAPD, and Cairo International Center for Conflict Resolution, Peacekeeping and Peace Building. I will leave it at that and turn to the briefing segment with your kind permission, and I'm pleased to welcome our distinguished briefers today. We have with us His Excellency Honorable Daouda Jallow, Attorney General and Minister of Justice of the Gambia. We welcome your kind presence, Honorable Minister, to be followed by Dr. Lamine Cisse, Chairperson of the TRRC, and to be followed by Mr. Mohammed Saleh Al-Nadif, Distinguished SRSG and Head of the UN Office for West Africa and the Sahel, then to be concluded by Mrs. Tabu Niji Sar, President of the Gender Platform in the Gambia. With your kind permission, I give the floor to the Honorable Minister and the Distinguished Attorney General. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Your Excellency, Ambassador Mr. Osama Abdel Khalik, Chairman of the PBC. Your Excellency, Mr. Oscar Fernandez Taranco, Assistant Secretary General, Peace Building Support Office. Your Excellency, Mr. Mohammed Saleh Al-Nadif, the Special Representative of the Secretary General for West Africa and the Sahel. Dr. Lamine J. Cisse, Chairperson of the TRRC. Your Excellencies, members of the Development Partner Group, whom I invited to observe this meeting. Your Excellency, members of the PBC, that is the Peace Building Commission, Mrs. Tabu Nji, President of the Gender Platform, my colleague, honorable ministers, I'm not too sure, I couldn't see them on the screen. I was expecting the Foreign Minister and the Minister of Finance, that is Mambure Njai and Dr. Tangara, respectively, and Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It is a pleasure and an honor on my part to be given once again the opportunity to address the Peace Building Commission. I wish to state from the onset that the government and the people of the Gambia are deeply appreciative of the tremendous assistance and support rendered by the PBC since the beginning of the transition period in 2017. The support came at critical time and helped to set the course of the events in the right direction. On the election year, like the chairman rightly mentioned, we are beginning our election cycle about now. beginning with the presidential election to be followed 3 months later by the legislative election and subsequently the local government election. The Gambia will be heading to the polls in December this year. The presidential election will take place on the 4th day of December 2021, as proclaimed by the Independent Electoral Commission. An elections bill was tabled by the Ministry of Justice in 2020 and is still being considered by the National Assembly. All preparations currently being done in anticipation of the December elections are being done in line with the Current Elections Act of 1996, which was initially passed as a military decree in 96, and under the current 1997 Constitution. The general voter registration exercise, which ran from the 29th of May to the 11th of July, was successfully concluded. As you may be aware, upon conclusion of the voter registration exercise, the Chief Justice constituted 11 election revising courts across all the regions in all the administrative areas of the Gambia. This is a requirement under the Elections Act. Interestingly enough, there were no appeals or objections received in respect of the published list of voters and list of deletions. Therefore, since the duration for lodging complaints elapsed, the revising courts only dealt with the double registration cases submitted to read by the Independent Electoral Commission. As we all know, the upcoming presidential elections will be our first major election during the transitional justice process. This year's election will be different in the sense that it will be the first presidential election in our boarding democracy. Government has started a series of campaigns as well as dialogue with all political parties and leaders to maintain and keep peace during the electoral cycle. International IDEA, in collaboration with my ministry and supported by the British government, has commenced a series of dialogues on peaceful elections during the presidential and legislative elections. All political parties and presidential aspirants are expected to sign a code of conduct, reaffirming their commitment to refrain and condemn all acts of electoral violence, cooperate with the IEC, and to accept the results of the elections as announced by the chairperson of the Independent Electoral Commission. This proposed code will complement other efforts by the Independent Electoral Commission and Inter-Party Committee comprising the representatives of political parties. On the issue of diaspora voting, I must emphasize that we recognize the Gambian diaspora as an integral part of the Gambia and will always be considered in high esteem. Diaspora voting, as you all know, is very complex and would require elaborate and adequate arrangements for its implementation. Time has, however, not permitted us to put in place all the necessary mechanisms to implement diaspora voting for this election. It is also worthy to mention that adequate security is being put in place to ensure peaceful elections. This includes recruitment and training of additional personnel in the Gambia Police Force. Logistics in the form of vehicles and other equipment still remain a big challenge for the security. On the TRRC and the post-TRRC, the Truth, Reconciliation, Reparation Commission established to investigate human rights violations and abuses perpetrated against citizens during the former regime has concluded its public hearings. The report of the commission is due to be submitted any moment from now. In a short while, this meeting will directly hear from the chairman of the TRRC regarding the progress made towards the completion of their report. However, I must state that the Truth Commission enjoys the continuous support and cooperation of the government, and we eagerly await its report and recommendations. Government will thoroughly study the report. I would like to assure you all of this government's commitment to the implementation of the recommendations of the TRRC. We are already in touch with a number of our bilateral and multilateral partners for the necessary capacity enhancement support to my ministry to enable us to discharge our mandate to government regarding the TRRC report within the 6-month statutory period. It is our fervent belief that the victim deserves justice, and it is therefore our responsibility as a Ministry of Justice to ensure that the victims get justice. This is a challenge that we have taken up, and we will invest time and energy towards ensuring the attainment of this goal. In fulfillment of our aspirations to ensure justice for victims of human rights abuses and violations, the government, in collaboration with the UNDP and Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights, has concluded a project proposal in support of implementation of the recommendations of the TRRC for submission to the Peace Building Fund. The project, if approved, will go a long way in assisting the government in the timely implementation of the recommendations arising from the TRRC report. In addition, my ministry and the Victims Center are currently setting up a victims-led task force for the drafting of legislation to set up a victims compensation fund to succeed the TRRC reparations committee. Government has already committed over $150 million in the draft 2022 budget estimate to be utilized as part of the reparation fund. On legislative reforms, I am pleased and glad to note that the bill on access to information has been passed by the National Assembly, and the President have assented to it on the 25th of August 2021. It is now law in the Gambia. The Access to Information Act will create a conducive environment for Gambians to freely access information from government and government officials. On persons with disability, I'm equally delighted to state that the long-awaited Persons with Disability Bill has been enacted by the National Assembly, and it is also now law in operation. The Act makes provisions for general welfare and protection of persons with disabilities and for connected matters, and also ensures that persons with disabilities are protected from all forms of discrimination as guaranteed under our Constitution. Regarding the Anti-Corruption Bill, it was tabled by this ministry before the National Assembly in 2019. Since then, it has gone through various stages of enactment process, and it is currently before the plenary for third reading. That is the final limb of the legislative process. The Constitutional Amendment Bill of 2021. The Ministry of Justice has reviewed and advised on the Constitutional Amendment Bill of 2021, proposed to be tabled by the representative for Banjul South, Honorable Tumanjai. The purport of the bill is to enlarge the composition of elected members of the National Assembly to provide for the reservation of specific seats for women and persons with disabilities. The bill proposed the addition of 14 women, 2 elected from each administrative area, 2 persons elected by the persons with disabilities from among the members of the Federation representing such persons, and at least one of whom shall be a woman, and 2 members nominated by the President, at least one of whom shall also be a woman. The bill has been gazetted twice by the Ministry of Justice as required under the Constitution, and is now ready for tabling before the National Assembly, where it was meant to be a private member bill, so we wouldn't be involved at that stage. But we have completed all the processes on our part. Briefly on security sector reform, although the highly ambitious targets or milestones set out in the SRS or SSR agenda at the dawn of the transition were not fully met, notwithstanding, as the chair of the SSR steering committee, this ministry is pleased to report that some considerable milestones have been achieved, notably the development of the national security policy, the security sector reform strategy, the national security strategy. These are all in place now. The national defense policy is scheduled for validation, and the process of developing an internal security policy has also commenced, led by the Ministry of Interior. The National Security Bill, which seeks to establish the Office of the National Security as the central coordinating office of the national security matters, is also ready and will be presented to the National Assembly at the earliest opportune moment. The National Vetting and National Counterterrorism Strategy Implementations Plans were launched in December 2020. At this launching, we also launched the following 2 handbooks. That is the First Responder to Counterterrorism Scene and the Hostage Situation Handbook. In addition, counterterrorism training were conducted for the State Guards, the Police Intervention Unit, and the State Intelligence Services. The vetting bill has been gazetted as well and is now due for tabling before the National Assembly. In conclusion, Chairperson, Your Excellencies, the Gambia government under the leadership of President Barrow remains committed to the fulfillment of the reforms promised to the Gambian people since 2017. Every effort is being made to promote our nascent democracy and respect for human rights in the Gambia. There is no turning back on that agenda under our watch. I thank you all for your support, in particular the UNDP, the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, and members of the PBC and officials of the PBSO. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister, for this very rich and comprehensive briefing. We highly appreciate the progress made, of course, all of us, and you will listen to member states once we conclude the briefers list. Now I give the floor to Dr. Lamine Sis, Chairperson of the TRRC. Dr. Lamine, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Chairman. Very happy to join you this meeting of the PBC. We're having a bit of connection challenges here. So if you bear with me, I hope we don't have any interruption as we continue with these proceedings. On January 7th, 2019, the Gambia, through the Truth, Reconciliation and Reparations Commission, began a unique process of holding live public hearings of the testimonies of the victims, as well as those of self-confessed perpetrators of human rights violations and abuses that occurred in the Gambia during the 22-year military dictatorship of Yahya Jammeh. The principal purpose of the commission was very simple: to establish the truth of what happened during that period. The National Assembly of the Gambia, which established the TRRC, enacted a law, TRRC Act 2017, which gave a mandate to the Commission to do, among other things, create an impartial historical record of violations and abuses of human rights from July 1994 to January 2017, in order to promote healing and reconciliation, respond to the needs of the victims, address impunity, and prevent a repeat of the violations and abuses suffered by making recommendations for the establishment of appropriate preventive mechanisms, including institutional and legal reforms. The Commission was also mandated to establish and make known the fate and the whereabouts of disappeared persons, provide victims an opportunity to relate their own accounts of the violations and abuses, grant reparations to victims in appropriate cases. When the Commission began its work, says in January, in these public hearings, it decided that these hearings will be transparent and broadcast live for all to see and hear the truth in real time. There is nothing better than telling the truth in the open. During the 871 days of the public hearings, the Commission, and indeed the world, heard from 393 witnesses, the majority of whom were victims of atrocities meted out to innocent civilians by the state, its agents, or individuals sponsored by both. The witnesses appearing before the Commission also included self-confessed perpetrators, very unique in the annals of truth commissions around the world. The testimonies heard from these witnesses brought pain and bewilderment to the population in the Gambia. They could not believe that the atrocities they were hearing from witnesses could occur in their country, a land of peaceful coexistence, a society imbued with tolerance of the highest order. They could not believe that innocent and ordinary citizens and other nationals found in the territorial jurisdiction of the Gambia, many murdered in cold blood, would be victims of the atrocities that the witnesses were narrating to the commission. The commission of these atrocities by Jammeh and his cohorts achieved the desired effect of instilling fear among the Gambian population. It also gave them time and space to pillage the resources of the country. Among the kind of atrocities and other human rights violations detailed by witnesses during these public hearings were the following: arbitrary arrests, unlawful detention, unlawful killings, torture, enforced disappearances, sexual and gender-based violence, inhuman and degrading treatment, witch hunting, fake HIV/AIDS treatment, and general and widespread abuse of public office. The phenomenon of leaders of military coups civilianizing or military coups civilianizing themselves was rampant in the sub-region of West Africa. These leaders rigged and held fast elections to perpetuate their rule. The Gambia became a collective victim of this phenomenon. Witnesses have testified before us that structures that underpin good governance, for example, respect for the rule of law and the independence of the judiciary, were virtually non-existent during the 22-year period. Jammeh has gone, he's gone. The killings by state agents have stopped. Torture is no longer sanctioned by the state. Junglers, the killer squad established by Jammeh, have dispersed, some in foreign lands, while others stayed to confess their misdeeds. The folly of ruling the Gambia for a billion years abruptly and ignominiously ended in 22 years. The Commission, in dealing with its work, decided to focus on themes. We developed 19 themes, essentially. Soldiers with a difference. November 11th, attempted coup, where extrajudicial killings had occurred. The unlawful killing of then Finance Minister Usman Korosise. Attack on road users. Attack on freedom of expression. April 10th and 11th, 2000, student demonstrations, where about 14 young students were killed. Attack on political opponents and attack on religious freedom. The junglers, as I mentioned earlier, who were a hit squad established by Jammeh, had undertaken unlawful killings, tortures, and other human rights violations. Another theme that we looked at was the presidential alternative treatment program. And that's where AIDS patients were brought in and treated by the president, who was not, and has never been a medical expert. Sexual and gender violence was also a theme that we looked at. The 2009 witch hunt, about 40 people died during that program, and shortly after that, because they were given concoctions that really ended up killing them. Killing of West African migrants, of the, between 50 and 60 of these migrants who were victims of human trafficking, who happened to find themselves on the beaches of the Gambia, and they were rounded up, they were taken to be mercenaries and brutally slaughtered. We also looked at the institutional hearings, the mandate asking us to focus on institutional reforms. We looked at them at the National Intelligence Agency, the NIA, institutional hearings dealing with the prisons as well, and the justice sector entities. And that was the focus when we looked at the judiciary. And reparations and reconciliation, outreach activities that were taken by our units. And recently we started paying reparations to victims. That's a process that's going to go on post-TRRC. Reconciliation is a process also that would continue, looking at both individual, interpersonal reconciliation as well as community reconciliation. But these are the areas that we had worked on. We are in the process of finalizing our report. We hope that within the next few days or so, we should be able to submit the report to the president. That is required under the Act, that at the end of our operations, we submit to the president a report which would contain our findings and recommendations. So far, those findings, we have about maybe 415 findings of these 19 things that I just reviewed. And recommendations are probably around 180. We're just finalizing those. There's not been any interference, contrary to what we've been hearing from some quarters. No interference at all. No pressure has been put on the commission as to what we should put in. Yeah, and the government is really worked very close. I mean, respected our independence, and we were the ones who just did not finish our work. But that is supposed to happen within the next few days. Mr. Chairman, I think I better stop here, and if there are any questions later on, I would be very happy to answer them. Thank you very much indeed for the opportunity to address some of the commission.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lamine, and that's very kind of you being ready to respond to any queries. But indeed, your briefing was quite comprehensive and covering what we have anticipated to hear from your good self. We salute you for that, and I give the floor now to my dearest brother, Mr. Mohammed Saleh Al Nadif, distinguished SRSG. You have the floor, brother.
Thank you, Chairperson. Please, with your permission, I will deliver my presentation in French, but you will have the English version through the screen. Monsieur le Président, d'abord, je voudrais vous dire merci pour tout ce que votre pays fait pour l'Afrique en général et le Sahel en particulier. Excellence Daouda Jallow, procureur général et ministre de la justice du option bloquée. Yes, ouais. Ok, bon, je ne sais pas. Bon, bref. Docteur Cissé, président de la TRC. My sister Tabou Jessar, président de la plateforme genre. Et mon frère Oscar, sous-secrétaire général à l'appui et la consolidation de la paix. Excellences, mesdames, messieurs. Je voudrais tout d'abord remercier le président de la commission de la consolidation d'avoir convoqué de façon opportune cette réunion aujourd'hui. En effet, dans moins de 6 semaines, le peuple gambien votera pour l'élection d'un nouveau président. Il s'agit d'une importante phase dans le cadre de la consolidation démocratique du pays. Je viens juste, Monsieur le Président, de rentrer de Banjul, où j'étais jusqu'à ce matin. Hier, j'ai participé avec le président de la commission de la CEDEAO au Forum national des partis présents en faveur d'élections pacifiques et crédibles en Gambie. Les dirigeants des partis politiques ont signé un engagement de paix en présence des acteurs politiques et de la société civile, ainsi que des observateurs internationaux. Il s'agissait d'un excellent événement organisé par la IPC, qui est le comité interparti de la Gambie. C'est un modèle propre aux Gambiens, un modèle exemplaire, avec l'aide de l'UNOAS, du bureau du coordonnateur résident et surtout du PNUD, que je vois représenté par Aïchata qui est dans l'écran, du Haut Commissariat aux droits de l'homme, de l'Institut national démocratique et de l'Union de la presse gambienne. J'étais il y a quelques semaines également en Gambie, où j'ai rencontré le chef de l'État, j'ai rencontré beaucoup des acteurs politiques et de la société civile. J'ai échangé avec le président, mon frère Dr Cissé, président de la TRCC, avec ses collègues. Et il y a un travail extrêmement important qui s'est fait en Gambie et qui mérite d'être soutenu. Le soutien au partage d'expériences entre IPC et les structures similaires d'autres pays en Afrique devrait également être envisagé en coordination avec la CEDEAO. En tout cas, nous allons le faire. Excellences, Mesdames, Messieurs, depuis la dernière élection présidentielle de 2016, la Gambie a fait des progrès significatifs en termes de réformes. En ce qui concerne la justice transitionnelle, je ne dirai pas plus que ce que le président Lamine vient de dire tout à l'heure. Il y a beaucoup d'espoirs qui sont placés dans les recommandations de la TRCC. J'ose croire qu'ils ne décevront pas ces attentes. En ce qui concerne la réforme du secteur de sécurité, là également le ministre de la Justice en a parlé. Ça n'a pas beaucoup bougé. La réforme constitutionnelle n'a pas également bougé, mais il faut espérer que ces deux chantiers importants puissent au moins être une priorité pour le nouveau président de Gambie. En ce qui concerne maintenant l'appui à la consolidation de la paix en Gambie, je tiens à souligner et à saluer l'importance des contributions de fonds de consolidation de la paix. Il a permis au gouvernement d'entreprendre très tôt des réformes dans le domaine tel que la justice transitionnelle, les droits humains et la réforme du secteur de sécurité dont je viens parler. Sans parler de la dynamique au niveau des femmes, paix et sécurité, où le PBF a fait énormément de choses. Et on peut citer ce qui a été fait avec la société civile, l'Institut républicain international et ainsi de suite. Puisque je n'ai que 5 minutes, je ne voudrais pas prendre beaucoup de temps, dire tout simplement que tous ces chantiers qui ont commencé, y compris les recommandations, essayons de tout faire pour qu'elles soient la priorité de nouvelles autorités qui seront issues des élections du 4 décembre 2021. Monsieur le Président, pour finir et avec votre permission, je me permets de rendre hommage au nom de tous mes collègues, aussi bien de l'UNOAS que du Sahel, une mention spéciale à mon cher ami, frère et collègue Oscar, pour son engagement et l'efficacité avec laquelle il s'est impliqué pour la résolution des crises que l'Afrique connaît en général et ceux du Sahel qui lui est cher, je sais, en particulier. En tout cas, cher Oscar, bon vent et au plaisir de te rencontrer à d'autres occasions. Monsieur le Président, c'est l'hommage que je voudrais rendre à un frère, un ami qui a beaucoup donné pendant près de 6-7 ans pour que ce fonds-là puisse d'abord être connu et donner des résultats au niveau de la sous-région du Sahel. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much, my dear brother, distinguished SRSG, and I share the same exact sentiments you have expressed towards Oscar Taranco, and with the kind permission, toward the end of the meeting, we'll have an opportunity to bid proper farewell briefly to our dearest brother and colleague, ASG Oscar Fernandez Taranco. Last but not least, I give the floor to my dearest sister, Tabu Sar, President of the Gender Platform. You have the floor, Masar.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Your Excellencies, Mr. Osama Abdel Khalik, Chair of the PBC. Your Excellencies, Honorable Daouda Jallow, Minister of Justice and Attorney General, Dr. Lamin Sise, Chairperson of the TRRC, Your Excellency, Secretary General ANEDEF, Office of the UN Office of the West African and the Sahel, and members of the PBC, and my dear colleagues and international partners in the Gambia, especially the UN system. On behalf of the members of the platform, I am honored to be given this opportunity to share updates with the PBC on the TJ process in the Gambia from a civil society perspective. The Civil Society Gender Platform was formed in 2017, and the civil society led, advocating, and consists of women's rights organizations and individuals to provide high-level strategic support during the establishment of the transitional justice process in the Gambia, to advocate for gender justice. It recognizes that progressive national and international instruments can help in empowering, protecting, and promoting women's rights. The platform considers participation and development as a fundamental right for citizens, particularly women, young people, and girls, and that the state has the fundamental primary duty to promote this. In this vein, it has been serving as a lead advocate in the promotion of women's rights, social, economic, and political justice, sexual and gender-based violence, for the promotion and protections of rights of women and girls, in the reconstruction of national institutions and reform processes through the Transitional Justice Program. With support from the UN Peace Building Fund, the CSO Gender Platform was able to influence the processes, beginning with the composition of the commissioners to be gender responsive in all mechanisms and processes of the TJ program. We all know that the Gambian society is highly patriarchal, and with this support, barriers were overcome because of the technical and financial support derived from the Peace Building Fund. Also, the Gender Platform was accorded institutional support from the Peace Building Fund through the UNDP. Beginning with the CRC, the platform still continue to advocate for the bringing back of the the draft constitution that was rejected by the National Assembly. And also the security sector reform. The Gender Platform was also accorded the opportunity to participate in this process. So many gains have been made in the TJ process, especially with regard to rule of law, respect for human rights, and freedom of expression. Within the framework of the TJ program, most of the mechanisms were out of acts of parliament, and it accommodates the equality principle between men and women. The Minister of Justice provided an open door policy for the platform. This enables the Gender Platform to fully utilize the process and advocate for progressive inclusion of minorities, particularly women. The TJ program was all new to all of us, but it played a pivotal role in unearthing the truth of 22 years of gross human rights violations, educating and raising awareness of peace and social cohesion, and healing for a pluralized population, thus providing a space to contribute to the reform processes under the TJ program, especially during the Constitutional Review Commission consultations. Women and young people were included, with which many people, especially women, own all the processes and contributed effectively. Your Excellencies, women were accorded spaces to discuss issues that were considered taboo in our society, such as SCBV, the discriminatory laws, security and safety, and low representation of women. With the support and within the framework, the agenda platform was able to come up with a private member bill, as the Honorable Minister has highlighted, reserving seats for women, which will be historic if it is passed, for the inclusion of women and people living with disability in the political process. I must further equate that if this bill is much needed for the inclusion of women and people living with disability in national decisions. The constitutional amendment bill, as the Minister has highlighted, is proposing for 14 seats to be drawn from the 7 regions of the Gambia. We are all aware that the 1997 Constitution, which we operate now, because of the failure of the passing of the draft 2021 Constitution, has provisions for equal participation of men and women, but this is only on paper. De facto or in practice is an illusion for women and people living with disabilities due to structural inequalities and social differences between men and women. And we all know that for a more equitable society, gender responsive legislation and programs, economic growth and prosperity, and stronger families include increased peace building, healthier women protected from sexual and gender-based violence, more social issues and good governance. So therefore, as a country, we must be able to increase our women, youth, and people living with disabilities to be part of those that are making decisions for development opportunities. As we witness the rounding up of the Transitional Justice Program with only the TRRC left, we would like to consolidate the gains made so far during the process of the TJ with full support of the UN Peace Building Fund and other development partners. As members of the Peace Building Commission of the UN, the solidarity rendered to the Gambian people in the reform processes has a positive impact on the lives of the population, especially civil society organizations, who has continued to advocate and are listened to by the executive and the legislature, which is a major milestone and a highlight of the TJ program. This is historic, and we are soliciting for more support to realize these major milestones for a peaceful, just, and equitable society. It is only when we do not witness conflict that people live in peace. Equality and injustice exposes women and vulnerable groups to many forms of abuses, and therefore can be considered as war weapons for women, especially in a highly patriarchal society. I have served as a Chief Reconciliation Officer of the TRRC before our contract runs out. And during those times, we have conducted many peace building activities to provide social cohesion, as well as healing and peace. And I must confess that in as much as we have successes, there are challenges as well. And over 22 years of fear, repression, massive human rights violations, structural inequalities, and a culture of silence have scared the socio-political landscape with deep mistrust and suspicion. The politics of division and patronage practiced by the former president and manifested in the appointments of friends, were manifested in the appointment of friends and those of his ethnic group. And this has been seen with the voting pattern of April 2016 with this present legislature. In the National Assembly elections, most parties from ethnic backgrounds have got seats, but according to how big your ethnic group is. In conclusion, on behalf of the CSO Gender Platform, we recommend for support of an infrastructure for peace, which should be independent, which should be an independent mechanism that victims are accorded with, so that victims are accorded with justice, with an advisory board drawn from the diverse people of integrity and influential in Gambian society. This is highly needed because the TRRC will soon round up and produce recommendations. And we think that from civil society perspective, there is a need for the establishment of a peace commission to provide healing, to advocate for peace, because we are heading towards elections, and we all know that elections are a potential source for conflict. And considering that we are still polarized, I think there is a need to put up a mechanism that is independent to ensure that peace is maintained in this country. And also an inclusive national and community dialogues on reconciliation and issues of national concerns are needed. There is also the need to practice reconciliation because it is highly needed in this country, so that it will allay the fears of recommendations of the TRRC not being implemented. And also government should still open its doors. Yet it is doing it because we're enjoying that provision, that opportunity with government. And this will also help us to harness the faith that everybody, both Christians and Muslims, enjoy. And these are powerful sources, especially the religious leaders, for reconciliation and healing. And it will also help leverage religious leaders and spaces, but also not forgetting that our traditions and rituals for reconciliation. Civil society will always continue to advocate with support from development partners to ensure that we have a peaceful elections, especially as we gear towards the 2021 presidential election and the follow-up elections. On that note, I thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to share our updates with the TJ program, which the Gambian people have owned, especially civil society, because it has brought us closer as a people, regardless of where you find yourself, either in the executive or in the judiciary or in the legislature. Civil society and government are working as partners. And I am quite optimistic that with your support, we will continue to have peace or maintain peace in this country. With all the TJ mechanisms so far, it was worth giving it a try in the Gambia. And we will also like to advocate for more support in order for this bill to be passed for a just and peaceful society. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, my dear sister Tabusar, for this very rich briefing as well. I give the floor now to my dearest brother, Ambassador Lang, the distinguished PR of Gambia, to be followed by Ambassador Bob Day of Canada. Ambassador Lang, my brother, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair, my dear brother, Ambassador Osama, Chair of the Peace Building Commission and Permanent Representative of Egypt. Honorable Minister Dauda A. Jallow, Honorable Attorney General and Minister of Justice of the Gambia, Dr. Lamin J. Cissé, Chairperson of the Truth, Reconciliation and Reparations Commission of the Gambia, Excellency Mr. Muhammad Saleh Anadif, Special Representative of the Secretary General and the Head of the UN Office for West Africa and the Sahel, ASG Oscar Fernandez Taranco and team, Mrs. Tabunjai Sarr, President of Gender Platform, the Gambia, Excellencies, partners, dear friends and colleagues. thank you for attending this PBC meeting on the transitional justice process of the Gambia. Mr. Chair, I would start by extending our sincere thanks and appreciation to the Attorney General and Minister of Justice, the TRRC CARE, the UN Special Representative, and the civil society representative for their concise and informative briefing on the situation of transitional justice in the Gambia. Similarly, I thank you, CARE, ASG Oscar, and your entire teams for partnering with the Permanent Mission to organize today's briefing. I will also, on behalf of the government and people of the Gambia, extend special appreciation to all colleagues and participants for attending and continuing to support us. As a government and people, the Gambia continues to appreciate and cherish the important roles that the PBC, PBF, PBSO, and each of the partners continue to play in our transitional justice processes. Mr. Chair, from the beginning in 2017, all of you showed and demonstrated commitment to the cause of our country. The briefings today have given us clear insight to how far we have gone with our transitional justice processes, especially as it relates to TRRC and other reforms. Therefore, going into the future, the Gambia would like PBC and all partners to continue accompanying it on the important journey that we all started together in 2017. The PBC's use of its convening power to support the mechanisms to be put in place for the successful implementation of the TRRC outcomes and future transitional justice processes in the country is something that we continue to look forward to. Your catalytic support and commitment from both sides made a lot of difference in this partnership, and we remain grateful for the stand you took when we were in need in 2016-2017. Mr. Chair, the Gambia needs continuous support to invest in its youth, women, enhancing its food system, promote renewable energy, address climate change, invest in its social, economic, and human capital, recover from COVID-19 pandemic, and most importantly, build back better inclusively. Without this, it will be difficult for the country to continue to sustain the achievements registered, achieve the SDGs, as well as overcome the challenges affecting its socio-economic development in this decade of action. We would therefore appreciate PBC and other partners' support in further linking further peace building and transitional justice and reform processes and activities in the country to the above. As a government, we will continue to need your support, partnership, solidarity, and goodwill to enable us realize the aspirations and agenda of our transitional justice and reform processes. Mr. Chair, looking at the context we started from in 2017, the Gambia registered great achievement in its transitional justice and other reform processes. And it is now time to further consolidate and sustain those gains, especially in the areas of peace and security, human rights protection, rule of law, democracy, social cohesion, and building an all-inclusive developed nation. Consequently, we will welcome PBC's support, partnership, as well as leadership in mobilizing the needed international effort for the above purpose. Mr. Chair, the Peace Building Commission's continued engagement with the Gambia and the continued periodic reporting to the Commission confirms the commitment and importance the government of the Gambia attaches to this partnership. Above all, the successes we achieve together also confirm the effectiveness of timely preventive diplomacy. And that is a lesson which we must nurture and sustain as a good reference point when it comes to preventive diplomacy. The convening power of PBC continues to work greatly for us in building and sustaining peace, dividends of democracy, as well as manage our transitional justice and reform processes. And I have no doubt that the Gambia can continue to leverage on this. In conclusion, Mr. Chair, I once again seize the opportunity to thank the PBC, PBSO, PBF, and all our multilateral and bilateral partners for demonstrating consistency in supporting us since 2017. Finally, I seize this opportunity to pay special thanks and tribute to ASG Oscar Fernandez Tarango for his support to the Gambia and other PBC engaged countries. Mr. Tarango, you have done your best for peace building in the world, and we remain grateful. I thank you all.
Thank you very much, my dear brother, Ambassador Lang, for the acknowledgement of the successes, and we equally the same. We acknowledge the successes that is truly happening in your great country, and we echo your call for wider support from all the international community for that wonderful journey of transition in the Gambia to be concluded very successfully. I give the floor now to Ambassador Bob Ray, and we have a long list of speakers. The wish of the chair is to conclude by 11:30, so kindly be straight to the point. Ambassador Bob, the distinguished PR of Canada, you have the floor.
I noticed that you started your warnings with me, so that's fine. I will be very brief, my dear friend Osama. All protocols observed. I particularly appreciate the participation from our friends and colleagues from Zambia and from the region. J'apprécie beaucoup les paroles qui viennent de nos amis du Sahel et jusqu'à quel point nos efforts sont tellement importants. I want to thank Ambassador Lang for his contributions today, and just to say two or three things. The first is that Canada itself, as you may know, has gone through a process of a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And we know how painful and difficult and challenging a process it can be, and we're still going through it, and it continues. So when I speak to you, I don't speak from a position of any sense of being in a different, we're in the same boat. Many people don't imagine that there's developed countries that are going through these processes, but we do, and we have to go forward together. The second is to congratulate the Gambia for what it has achieved so far. I think that the coming out of a long period of dictatorship is tremendously difficult. We've seen it in so many parts of the world, and we know how challenging it can be. And democracy involves learning some good habits and abandoning some bad habits, and it's not easy to get there. And we understand that. We've also enjoyed our partnership with the Gambia on the issue of accountability involving the Rohingya refugees. We are partners in the International Court of Justice, together with our colleagues from the Netherlands, and we attach a great deal of importance to that ongoing relationship that we have with the Gambia. It's very important to us. I think my message to the meeting would simply be that we will continue to support, obviously, through the Peace Building Fund, as well as through what we call our Local Initiatives Fund, work with civil society, particularly work with women and youth on issues of social justice and of full participation in the elections to come and in the work of civil society. We have increased our donations or contributions to the Peace Building Fund. In addition to being a great leader for the organization, Oscar is also a very good arm twister. So we have responded to his arm twisting, and we will continue to do that in terms of our funding for the PBF. And I also think, though, that one must say that it's a two-way street. I think every reason to seek greater engagement from the PBF, from the PBSO, from all of the institutions of the UN. But I thought we also require and need a continuing commitment from leadership in the Gambia to a truly democratic and participatory process in which elections happen and one doesn't necessarily know what the result is going to be, but that's what an election is all about. There has to be a respect for minority rights. There has to be a respect for doing everything we can to put an end to any intercommunal violence or anything of that kind. We have to work hard to make sure that peace prevails during the election process, and that will require the full engagement of our Gambian partners. So it is a partnership in which we're very committed to participating. And Mr. Chair, with those remarks, you can cut me off. I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, my dear friend, Ambassador Bob, for the brevity and the clarity and the commitments that you have made. I wish to give the floor now in that order to the distinguished PRs of Slovakia, Ambassador Mikhail, and then Matu, my dear sister of South Africa, Ambassador Rabab of Bangladesh, and then we will hear our dearest brother and friend, ASG Oscar Fernandez Tranco, and we move ahead. Ambassador Mikhail, the distinguished Vice Chair, you have the floor, my friend.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair, dear Osama, much appreciated. I will follow this good example of Ambassador Bob. We certainly welcome the continued engagement of the PBC with the Gambia to advance the democratic transition, consolidate progress made, renew commitment to the constitutional reform process, and contribute to sustained peace and stability in the country. We keenly await the outcomes of the Truth, Reconciliation and Reparations Commission, and notably the next government's intended follow-up to its final report and recommendations. Of course, the presidential elections in December offer a unique opportunity to promote space for political and inclusive dialogue about the future of the Gambia. The priority is to guarantee active participation of all political parties and the civil society. And of course, it was very important for us this morning to hear the voices with updates and with a lot of practical information, which is greatly appreciated. Following the elections and once a new government is in place, we certainly will keenly encourage the Gambia to further strengthen its engagement with the international community and to continue engaging with us in the same spirit, of course, continuing to build the partnerships and the important frameworks that have already been built. Just really one last point which I wanted to highlight is the importance of consensus building and coordination in the security sector as well. We have engaged with the Gambia a lot on this important file, and I understand that there is a keen interest and involvement of the Gambian authorities in this particular context, based on the national SSR strategy, which prioritizes not only national ownership, but of course, also engaging with all key stakeholders and making sure that the process is based on the governance perspective and long-term approach. So with that in mind, we certainly are open to further engage and look forward to receiving more details as we go ahead. And of course, the role of the PBF remains instrumental and crucial in that same context. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Mikhail, for as well the clarity and the brevity. I give the floor now to my distinguished sister, Ambassador Matu, the PR of South Africa. Matu, my sister, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chair. And let me begin by joining others in thanking you for convening this important and timely discussion on the Peace Building Commission and the Gambia. And we also thank the Honorable Minister and all the distinguished speakers for their insightful briefings on the TRRC. South Africa really, like others, look forward to receiving an update on the final report that the TRRC will present to the government following the conclusion of their mandate with findings and recommendation. Chair, please allow me to make the following points. Firstly, to really commend the government and people of Gambia for their commitment to peace and national reconciliation. And we also want to commend the TRRC for the good work that they've done so far. I think Dr. Cisse's input today gave us a very good indication of what the work of the TRRC entailed. And it certainly is comprehensive. And South Africa, like Canada, knows firsthand the value of Truth and Reconciliation Commission and its contribution towards addressing the concerns of victims, holding perpetrators accountable, and really providing a platform for inclusive dialogue and healing. And as Bob said, it's an ongoing process. I mean, in South Africa, we are still working on nation building. Minister, we are encouraged by your comments on the commitment to implement the provisions and recommendations of the TRRC. I think this is a courageous and positive step towards successful peace building and nation building for all the people of the Gambia and its diaspora. And it looks like, by all accounts, the update that you have given demonstrate that much has been done in many areas of peace building that you set out for yourself. Listening to you around legislative reform, which is well underway, and there's a promising start to security sector reform. And just to say that we also appreciate the inclusion of women in all your processes. And I think Mrs. Tabunjesa confirmed that for all of us on this platform. We also commend the roles of the Peace Building Fund and the PBC in supporting the political peace process. I think their contribution has been critical to national ownership and social cohesion in the Gambia. Their work has also been strengthened by the close cooperation with UNOWAS, ECOWAS, the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, and the UNDP and the whole UN country team, and they're all acknowledged. South Africa would like to have more regular engagement with these bodies to explore what the PBC, we would like to, we really will welcome that there be regular engagement with these bodies, with the PBC, to look at what more can be done. And as my colleague Mikhail has said, we chair the group of friends on security sector reform with Slovakia, and our own experience of SSR, we would like to, where possible, share that with the Gambia. To conclude, Chair, we wish the Gambia the very best with the upcoming elections, and certainly with preparing for the implementation of the recommendations of the TRRC. And listening to Ambassador Lang, I cannot but on behalf of South Africa, really wish Gambia well, listening to that vision of development that he outlined. We wish you well with that. And once again, we commend you for the work that has been done so far. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, my dear sister, Ambassador Mato, for the wisdom. And indeed, South Africa continues to be a source of inspiration in all situations where we have truth and reconciliation endeavors. I give the floor now to my distinguished friend, Ambassador Rabab, the distinguished PR of Bangladesh. Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you, my dear brother. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you also for organizing today's timely meeting. I wish to also thank the Honorable Minister and the briefers for their comprehensive briefing. Mr. Chair, I also join previous colleagues in commending the Gambian government for putting in place a truly effective peace-building effort through the Truth, Reconciliation and Reparations Commission. TRRC's efforts to ensure justice and accountability for victims and promoting national healing and reconciliation certainly forms a strong foundation for an inclusive nation-building process. And in this regard, we would like to commend the Peace Building Fund for its consistent investment in institution and capacity building in the Gambia, and the contribution of the UN country teams, especially the OHCHR and UNDP in this crucial endeavor, is also commendable. The TRRC in Gambia is indeed, Mr. Chair, a model that can be used in other settings where justice and national reconciliation is a key factor for inclusive and sustainable nation building. Mr. Chair, let me highlight 3 takeaways from the Gambian experience. First, the biggest strength of the TRRC in Gambia lies in its strong emphasis on national ownership. the buy-in of the national government, as well as the constructive engagement of the members of the society at large, including women and youth, makes the initiative sustainable and successful. Secondly, strengthening national institutions to make them self-sufficient is vital for sustaining peace. At the same time, promoting local peace builders, including the women, is also needed to complement the nation building process. And the Peace Building Fund's continuous investment in this area is critical. And I think we have seen the success it is seeing. And finally, focusing on the diaspora and recognition of their contribution is extremely important for promoting national healing and reconciliation. In this regard, we commend the inclusion of the diaspora voting in the next specific election. Mr. Chairman, we look forward to the final report of the TRRC, and we also wish a successful presidential election in December. This December, our support will always be there for the brotherly people of the Gambia. I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Excellency Ambassador Rabab, for the brevity and the clarity as well of your very rich input. I give the floor now to the locomotive of all the PBSO and a very instrumental member of all the successes, truly. Oscar, distinguished ASG Oscar Fernandez Franco, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Osama, Chair of the Peace Building Commission. Really, I am very, very moved, and I'm a little bit emotional about this because I've seen this Peace Building Commission grow in size and function and relevance over the past years. And it's, I think it's very important and telling that one of my last meetings here is on the issue of the Gambia, which actually shows how the flexible and reinvented procedures, the working methods of the Peace Building Commission has allowed the Commission to actually support this very important democratic transition that we've heard about. Let me basically just start by thanking all the distinguished briefers, the speakers, for the very substantive, very profound, very powerful presentations, starting with His Excellency, the Attorney General and Minister of Justice, Mr. Jallo, for his very profound description of all the efforts that are going on the multiple fronts and the reforms that the government has undertaken. Thank you, Mr. Minister, for that. Also to thank my former UN colleague and very good friend, Lamine Cissé, for his stellar leadership in literally establishing this TRRC and the manner in which he has been able to infuse it with inclusive, very transparent processes that he described. He did an amazing job in a very short time. To my very good friend, of course, the SRSG, Anadif, Special Representative of the SG and head of the UNOWAS office, because the partnerships and much of what we as an office and the fund is able to do is very much inspired by the leadership of UNOWAS, and SRSG. Anadif has been a particularly, how can I say, powerful force in terms of engaging us and helping us help member states, but also his mission on the ground. And of course, also to Madame Siar from the Gender Platform, because this again speaks to the importance of inclusivity in many of the briefings that we have in the PBC, and the very important role of civil society and the powerful voices of women peace builders, and the great role they have played in the Gambia. Let me just give a few remarks on what we have been trying to do in the Gambia. First of all, it has been a real honor to support the engagement of the Peace Building Commission since 2017, and especially the work of the TRRC. The PBC actually has constantly encouraged the work of the TRRC, commending again this inclusive approach that has contributed to strengthening the role of women in peace building and the inclusion of the citizens in much of the work of truth-seeking and reconciliation. The Peace Building Commission recognized the TRRC's community outreach activities, including the diaspora, as being quite essential. And I think many member states can take example, and this can be a very important role model for other such processes, not just in the African continent, but around the world. Let me, just because of this notion of how we address justice, accountability for victims, and promoting processes of national healing and reconciliation. So we have worked side by side with the Peace Building Commission, and I think the Secretary General's Peace Building Fund has been this avid supporter of transitional justice and the TRRC process in the Gambia from the very beginning, when the democratic transition process that we heard about and we have been accompanying. In all, we have invested over $3.7 million in supporting transitional justice and the TRRC efforts. And what's important here is that this commission actually has been globally recognized as this effective institution. It has been able, as we heard, to conduct so many open and transparent hearings and provide the victims with a secure environment and assistance in participating. We are particularly honored that the PBF support in this area was recognized by the government of the Gambia with an award presented by the TRRC to the Peace Building Fund, to UNDP, and to OACHR for the support that we have been providing over these past few years. But we were even more pleased to learn that 90% of the Gambian respondents to a 2020 survey said that the TRRC was performing, and I quote, performing very well or performing well. So this is a very positive sign regarding inclusiveness and legitimacy of the process in the eyes of the victims and the communities, which in turn is a crucial ingredient, is essential for strengthening trust, reconciliation between the population and the new democratic institutions of the state. We're also very encouraged by the positive feedback from women's groups who strive to maintain the gender dimensions in all the aspects of the transitional justice agenda. And as just we heard from Ms. Tabu Ndiaye Sarr, our efforts should continue to be guided by their recommendations. Well, the TRRC hearings have finished. Transitional justice, as Ambassador Bob Ray said, is a long-term process and an essential element to sustaining peace. And it is more important than ever to keep the momentum and show the people of the Gambia that the government continues to be committed in this process in implementing the recommendations that will emerge in line with the needs of the victims and the communities. And so we count on the TRRC to finalize and present its full report, and we count on the government to review it and to propose a clear plan for implementation based, again, on this very transparent and inclusive approach that has characterized this process, including opportunities for continuous feedback from all the segments of society. Victims and communities need this assurance that their rights to justice and reparations will be fulfilled and that past violations will not happen ever again. And those segments of civil society who have not felt sufficiently heard to date, especially women, need to be reassured by the government that the partners will do more to enable their participations in the next step of the process. We as a UN will continue to be very proactive and a reliable partner in this process. The SG's Peace Building Fund is now in the final stages of approving a post-TRRC project for the UN to support transitional justice agenda and the efforts to ensure this inclusive reconciliation process. And once approved, this project will provide an additional $3.5 million towards further advocacy, consultations, technical support, empowerment of civil society organizations and victims, monitoring of and support for the implementation of the recommendations, especially with regards to the justice pillar and the establishment of the reparation framework. And also we are looking to support through a complementary mechanism to address sexual and gender-based violence, including transitional justice through the Gender and Youth Promotion Initiative. There is a proposal for an additional $1.5 million that we are looking very favorable to approve in the coming days. So again, I think the measure of success is this continued transparency and legitimacy of the transitional justice process in the eyes of the Gambian people. And to fully, and I conclude with this, Mr. Chair, just to fully achieve these results intended by the Peace Building Fund, it is essential for the government of the Gambia to ensure dedicated funding and sustained commitment, and for the international community to continue supporting this effort, including by making available additional resources and global expertise in transitional justice. And before I conclude, just to thank you all for what has been a really very engaged partnership. I think we've taken the PBC to a totally new level. And I can only thank you all, because this was only made possible by your member state engagement. I think this is proving to be a crucial platform in this reinvented multilateralism that the Secretary General keeps talking about. And I take all your kind words to my regard as a acknowledgement of the very hard work that my team and PBSO, the very dedicated team, very committed professionals who have made everything that we talk about in these meetings possible, thanks to the true commitment of all my colleagues to, again, enhance the flexibility and the relevance of the Peacebuilding Commission. So thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for allowing me to share my gratitude to you all today as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You leave all of us speechless, Oscar. You have done a lot in that successes of the PBC, and you're very true. We have reached unprecedented level of achievement and successes due to your tireless efforts and your able team. And thank you very much for the very rich insights and for the wisdom with which you have been pouring into the PBC endeavors and programs. I give the floor now in that order to my dear brother, Omar Qadiri, the DPR of Morocco, to be followed by the DPR of Switzerland, EU, Netherlands, Japan, and St. Vincent and Grenadines, Germany. Please, a lot has been said. Try to be as brief as possible. We want to conclude. I give the floor to Omar Qadiri, the DPR of my brother. You have the floor, of Morocco.
Thank you very much, my dear brother, Ambassador Osama Abdel Khaliq, for convening this very timely meeting of the Peacebuilding Commission dedicated to the sisterly country of the Gambia. I would like to welcome the presence among us of His Excellency Daouda Jallow, Attorney General and Minister of Justice of the Gambia, Dr. Lamine Cissé, Chairperson of the TRRC, SRSG, Mohammed Saleh Nadif, and Ms. Tabu GSR, for their presence among us today and for their invaluable contributions. I seize this opportunity to highly commend the continued resolve and the impressive achievements of the government of the Gambia under the leadership of His Excellency President Adama Barrow in carrying out their national peace-building priorities despite all the difficulties imposed by the COVID pandemic. I would like to also stress the high importance of the request by the government of the Gambia for the support of the UN, member states, and partners regarding the funding for the Gambia's 2021-2023 electoral process. The chair of the PBC has kindly circulated this request with the aim of rallying support behind the Gambia's nationally identified needs, and we call on the UN and the partners to heed the request and to provide the full and necessary support as requested by the government of Gambia. Our meeting today takes place a few weeks before the major national milestones of the Gambian presidential elections scheduled in December. The holding of these elections is a strong testament of the attachment of the government and the people of the Gambia to the high standards of democracy and rule of law. Indeed, Mr. Chair, this is a time when the UN, the PBC, and partners should reinforce their support and assistance to the Gambia in delivering these important democratic milestones as requested by the government of the Gambia. We are fully confident that the government and the people of the Gambia will make of this milestone a model of democracy, and we have heard and have just been informed by His Excellency the Attorney General and Minister of Justice of all the measures taken to ensure the full success of these elections. Indeed, Mr. Chair, this is time when the UN, and PBC, and the partners, as I said, should reinforce their support. We also have all been witness to the outstanding efforts of the Gambia that it has steadfastly deployed to build and sustain its peace while resolutely carrying out its transitional reform process. In this regard, we highly recognize and pay tribute to the impressive and instrumental work the Truth, Reconciliation and Reparations Commission is performing in a matter of few short years. We welcomed, among other encouraging announcements in October 2020, in the midst of the COVID pandemic, the resumption of the public hearings of the TRRC, who is delivering an invaluable mandate in terms of sustaining national peace and reconciliation. The TRRC is at an important juncture of its mandate, and we thus highly welcome the precious insight Dr. Cissé, the chairperson of the Commission, shared with us today regarding the status of the Commission report and the possibilities of implementation of this recommendation, which will further cement Gambia's national peace-building efforts and achievements. And we highly also appreciate the information and the remarks made by His Excellency, the Minister of Justice in this regards. The UN and the other partners are called upon to continue their support to the work of the Commission. Moreover, despite the urgency linked to the pandemic, we need to keep.
Omar, I invite you to conclude, my dear brother.
I will have one more minute, my brother. One more minute. I thank you, Ambassador, for allowing me. I will be very. Despite this urgency linked to the pandemic, we need to keep strong emphasis on the primacy of the socio-economic dimension in the peace-building context of the Gambia, as well as the beneficial implications of the successful security sector reform in the country. All these elements constitute real sustaining peace measures that all the international community need to continue to support. Morocco, who has a very strong partnership in all fields with the Gambia, will continue to support the sisterly country in all its peace-building efforts, and we will continue to steadfastly work with the Gambian government and authorities towards this end. Finally, Morocco calls on the PBC and the international community to continue to come together to bring further sustained support to the Gambia. We commend the work of the PBF in this sisterly country and its contribution to strengthening the key peace-building areas as transitional justice, SSR, youth employment, and social cohesion. And we thank, finally, Mr. Taranko for all his effort and wish him all the best. Thank you.
Thank you, Omar. Now I give the floor to the distinguished DPR of Switzerland. Adrian, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and all colleagues here and the briefers for their comments. Much has been said indeed, and I will try to be very brief. This meeting indeed is particularly timely with regard of the important work of the Truth, Reconciliation, and Reparations Commission. As we repeatedly said, Switzerland considers that the respect for human rights is central in promoting peace, and in this context, Switzerland remains active in the field of dealing with the past through bilateral and multilateral activities. We aim to facilitate social reconciliation after serious violations of human rights or infringements of international humanitarian law. And in this context, we have followed the transitional justice process in the Gambia with particular interest and also supported the TRRC. And we believe its work is very instrumental and essential to contribute to national reconciliation. So transitional justice is an important base to prevent future human rights violations, as has been mentioned in this call this morning on several occasions. We kindly asked the TRRC to provide further information on the next steps and the timeline foreseen, notably the completion of the work and the presentation of its final report. And we encourage and congratulate the government of the Gambia to continue supporting and facilitating this important process. So we would very much welcome if the TRRC could present the final report and its recommendations to the PBC at an appropriate time. And with that, Mr. Chair, I thank you very much and all the briefers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I highly appreciate the brevity and your wisdom and cooperation. I give the floor now to the distinguished DPR of the European Union Mission. Silvio, you have the floor.
Thank you, Ambassador Osama, and really our appreciation for putting this topic on the agenda. The process of transitional justice in the Gambia is at a critical point, and it's important that we give a signal of support to the Commission and also of encouragement to the government to follow it up seriously. The process of transitional justice is one that we as EU have accompanied from the very beginning. And we're quite proud to having contributed also to the reform of the judiciary system, which is an important component. A judiciary that now is staffed by fully and exclusively Gambian, fully trained judges, magistrates, and legal personnel. We're also proud to have helped our Gambian friends establish the National Human Rights Commission, which is an important guarantor of the freedoms and rights of the Gambian people. But let me make one appeal to the government. More work needs to be done to erase the remnants of the former regimes from the penal code, notably the draconic and restrictive laws in the areas of peaceful assembly and freedom of expression. It's important that the Gambia makes progress there. Now, like all other participants, we think that it's important that the Commission finalizes its process, its work in a transparent, inclusive, and effective way, just like it's worked throughout its mandate. There is a clear link between a satisfactory conclusion of this process and the conduct of the presidential elections, which we are also proud to observe following an invitation by the Gambian government. We want the stability of this country. We want this country to be firmly on the path of democracy. So a couple of questions. Like my friend Adrian would like to have a clear idea of the time frame and what kind of measures the government wants to put in place to ensure follow-up to the recommendations, what kind of bodies it's going to establish in that respect. We want to know also how the Judiciary Strategic Roadmap and the donor conference, which is being organized on the 4th and the 5th of November, relates to the submission of the TRRC final report, and how the government sees the various strands of the transitional justice process come together. The white paper they are supposed to adopt following the final report of the Commission, the bill before the National Assembly that should establish a follow-up institution, and any other accountability mechanism that they are envisaging. Thank you very much, Ambassador.
Thank you very much. Now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Netherlands, Ambassador Sarah, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. And in the interest of time, allow me to focus on complimenting the Gambia and the Gambian Truth, Reconciliation and Reparations Commission for all the hard work they've done so far. We've been really pleased and honored to be able to work with the Gambia on a number of the processes that have been taking place in the country, particularly by contributing to the training of several groups. This includes media training on truth, reparations and reconciliation reporting, and human rights training for police officers, for prison officials, and for the Gambian members of parliament in 2017. I wanted to highlight one project that we've supported, which is the Truth, Reconciliation and Reparations Commission, Stories of Women and Marginalized Groups, that focused on the experiences of victims of sexual and gender-based violence, including the LGBT community, commercial sex workers, and victims of forced HIV treatment. We've spoken about the TRRC report. It's highly anticipated. I was going to ask when it's coming out, but we heard that'll be in the next couple of days, so that's fantastic. And with regard to other reform processes, we welcome the signing of the Access to Information Act, which enables journalists and the wider public to access official government information, which we see as a very important step for transparency and accountability. Finally, we welcome the intention of the Gambian government to repeal restrictive media laws that were inherited from the former government. These are all very important steps in the Gambia's democratic transition. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much. I give the floor now to the distinguished representative of Japan, Minister Plenipotentiary Hamamoto. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for convening this meeting. I also would like to thank all the briefers for your briefings. The international community must rally around the Gambia in preserving hard-won peace-building gains since 2017. As the country prepares for the upcoming presidential election followed by legislative elections, the PBC should continue to support the Gambia's peace-building priorities. The rule of law must prevail and the fight against impunity must continue. We commend that the TRRC has been inclusive and participatory, but we also note that the continued delay in the submission of its final report. We encourage the TRRC to finalize this report in a timely and independent manner. We hope that the report becomes the foundation for ensuring the rule of law and fighting impunity. The ultimate goal of peace building is to enable the state to ensure human security for its people. Therefore, building effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions, including in the security sector, is of the utmost importance. We encourage the Gambia to continue its institutional reforms, building upon the launch of National Security Strategy and Security Sector Reform Strategy. We also call on all stakeholders to accelerate their efforts in the constitutional review process. The Peace Building Fund has been playing a significant role in supporting of transitional justice reforms efforts, the participation and empowerment of women and youth. We hope these efforts catalyze further mobilization of resources and initiatives for peace building in the country. Lastly, Japan continues to support the Gambia through IOM's project to enhance the Gambia's authority capacities to manage the border and respond to COVID-19 and its socioeconomic impact, which also contribute to the institution building under the banner of New Approach for Peace and Stability in Africa. Japan also supported WFP's project to strengthen nutrition support to vulnerable in the country, and Japan also provided bilateral grant aid of about 2.3 million US dollars for food assistance this year. We will continue to support the Gambia's efforts in the area of peace building. I thank you.
Thank you very much for this very comprehensive input as well, and for all the rich input coming from all delegations and questions raised as well that will be responded to by the Honorable Minister, I hope, within minutes. Now I give the floor to the distinguished political coordinator of St. Vincent and Grenadines, Gonçalves. You have the floor.
Thank you, Excellency. Thank you, Chair. And I would like to thank the distinguished briefers for their briefings this morning. First, allow me to express our most sincere admiration for the work of the Truth, Reconciliation and Reparation Commission process. And I align with the views expressed already on this. We cannot agree more with the view that there is nothing like telling the truth in the open, and that without truth, there can be no justice. Likewise, the payment of reparations to victims is a critical step in efforts to make right the wrongs of the past. Secondly, we commend the efforts of the United Nations, in particular the Peacebuilding Commission, which the Gambia continues to count on for support. And to effectively implement the TRRC recommendations, strengthening the rule of law and justice system is of paramount importance. So in this regard, we take note of successful legislative efforts which aim to strengthen the rule of law and justice in the Gambia. Thirdly, with the assistance of the Peacebuilding Fund, the Gambia has made commendable progress. However, much remains to be done to cover the country's funding gap for peacebuilding and development priorities. Yet again, we renew our support for the critical function of the Peacebuilding Fund and underscore the need to collectively address this challenge of ensuring adequate, predictable, and sustained resources for peace building. Turning to the upcoming elections, which represent a significant step in the Gambia's progress in building and strengthening accountable, sustainable, and effective democratic institutions, we would like to call on the international community to strengthen its commitment and efforts to address critical funding gaps in support of the electoral process. Permit me a point on climate change based on a recent report, and I would like to commend the Gambia for prioritizing climate action and on their progress made in achieving the goals set out for all of us under the Paris Agreement. We underscore the critical linkage between climate change, development, and sustaining peace, and call on major emitters and for everyone to sharply reduce emissions and fulfill the climate funding pledges. Climate change is a collective challenge, and inertia on the part of some will have disastrous consequences for the most vulnerable among us. In closing, we would just like to highlight the importance of women's full and meaningful participation and leadership throughout all the processes mentioned today. And in this regard, we recognize the work of the Civil Society Gender Platform. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I give the floor now to the distinguished representative of Germany, to be followed by UK. And I kindly be as brief as possible. We want to avail an opportunity for the Honorable Minister and Dr. Lamine to respond. You have the floor, the distinguished representative of Germany.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, Excellencies. I'll be very brief. First of all, I'd like to thank and congratulate His Excellency Mr. Dauda Jallow and Dr. Hussein Cissé on your and all Gambians' remarkable achievements throughout the Gambian Truth and Reconciliation process. Success of this locally owned and locally driven process, we believe, is a model for peace building worldwide. So we're really glad to accompany this process. Also shows that transitional justice and the recognition and addressing of past human rights abuses are key for durable reconciliation and sustained peace. Human rights grievances are catalysts for conflict, as we recognize in many contexts, especially also in the Gambia. Therefore, addressing them has to be a central element of peace building efforts and the work of the Peace Building Commission. We're very glad to close that the Peacebuilding Fund could play such a crucial role in supporting the transitional justice process in the Gambia. And Germany would very much, like many other delegations, welcome a continued support by the PBC and the PBF to allow the implementation of the TRRC recommendations. And we're also very interested in the questions posed by other colleagues on the time frame, on the next steps. Thank you so much.
What's happened?
Thank you very much. The distinguished representative of UK, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I'll also be very brief. Really welcome this discussion, and I'm very grateful for the briefings this morning. The UK really supports the UN's role and also in support of the government of the Gambia. I have 3 quick points. Firstly, on the Truth and Reconciliation and Reparations Commission, the Gambia's commitment to this is really welcome, but we do have also concerns, as others have said, about the delay in releasing the Commission's findings. We welcome the recent ruling by the Supreme Court that those who committed these crimes under the JAMA regime shouldn't have immunity from prosecution. But we'd like to urge the Commission to release its report as soon as possible. On elections, Chair, my second point, the Gambia has made such important democratic gains since 2017. And as others have said, ensuring the peaceful and transparent election in December will be very much the next milestone. The international community is very much rooting for you, and we hope that the Gambia will take full advantage of the international support initiatives that are out there. We welcome the Independent Election Commission's work with a range of different observers. And I want to underscore the importance of fostering conditions for all of society to get a chance to vote. So we'd welcome Attorney General now or in due course, just a bit of an update on what steps you're taking to ensure that those from marginalized communities, including those with disabilities, are given an opportunity to participate in the democratic process. And finally, briefly, Chair, just on the constitutional review, to say that following the presidential elections next year, the UK believes this would be a timely opportunity for the government of the Gambia to reconsider the recent constitutional review and the draft constitution. So again, just let me conclude by restating the UK's full support for the government and the people of the Gambia. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for those very pertinent remarks and inputs. And now I wish to give the floor to the Honorable Attorney General, Mr. Dawda Jallo, and the Honorable Minister to respond to some of those comments, if he wishes to do so, to be complemented by Dr. Lamin Sarr as well. Honorable Minister, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Let Dr. Cisse start while I check something for the responses.
Great. Dr. Lamin, my dearest brother, you have the floor. Dr. Lamin Sarr, are you still around with us You're muted, my dear brother. We can't hear you. You need to unmute. Your microphone is muted, Dr. Lamin.
Okay, let me just quickly take advantage.
Please, Honorable Minister, you have the floor.
Yes. Well, first of all, I'll thank all those who took time to contribute, and we appreciate once again all your support. In fact, I must add, in addition to your support given to us multilaterally through the UN system, I must also acknowledge that quite a number of the countries present in the PBC are also supporting the Gambia bilaterally at the bilateral level. So we continue to be very much appreciative of all your support. I had the EU delegate or the permanent representative talking about the issue of the laws dealing with the Public Order Act. Of course, we are mindful of this. This probably will be part of the next batch of legislative reforms. At the moment, we have a whole backlog of reforms and drafting of reforms of these laws that are going on. So hopefully, the turn of events, whichever government comes, these gains will be consolidated upon, and the legislative reform agenda will continue. Regarding the time frame for implementation of the post-TRRC activities, the one that is very clear to us at the moment is the 6 months timeline within which government need to come up with a white paper after studying the report to inform the general public and of course the development partners as to what is our position with respect to the report and the recommendations submitted to us. That white paper will be the government policy as to the way forward. So the clear timeline at the moment would be that 6 months, both provided for under the TRRC Act, but also under the Constitution. The establishment of successor institutions, the one that is clear in my mind is the setting up of the Victims' Compensation or Reparation Fund to set up an institution. That legislative drafting process have started. So we hope the first session of Parliament after the presidential election, hopefully January, February session, we should be able to have that legislation passed so that we have that entity created as quickly as possible to replace the TRRC committee, that the reparations committee. That would be for that. Netherlands raised concern about restrictive media laws. Some of these things are contained in an amendment because we are replacing our penal code. The complete new penal code has been drafted. And most of these media restrictive laws are contained in our old penal code. So the new criminal bill, offences bill, and the criminal procedure bill are all in Parliament. They've been laid before Parliament, I think more than a year ago. Like I said, we have a backlog of legislative agenda in the National Assembly, but subsequently, when that is passed, a lot of the bad laws that are contained in our current penal code against media and media practitioners would no longer be in place once the new penal code is adopted. Similarly, Germany is also interested in the same time frame. I think the answer will suffice for that. The United Kingdom, of course, we appreciate all your support regarding, and I also appreciate your concern for the delay, but I think the chairman have said light on the delay. It's an ongoing work. It's a lot of work to get all those, like he said, over 800 days of public hearing, the transcripts and everything to come up with a report is, initially we thought it could have been easy, but they discovered it's a lot of work. But like he said, he has assured us that they are almost at the tail end of it. Hopefully we will get the report very soon in a couple of days or weeks. The elections and the constitutional review process that is raised by the United Kingdom. Elections, like I briefed, we are doing all our best to make sure that we go through a free, fair, participatory elections and very transparent elections. We are very committed to that, and we are going to ensure that happens. Regarding the constitution, the draft constitution, hopefully whichever government wins, the draft constitution will be revived and it will see light once again. I am aware for the executive that I'm serving, that is the government of the President Adama Barrow, we are very committed to reviving the draft constitution to bring it back if he happens to be the winner. But I saw no signs anywhere, even for those contending to become the next government. I have absolute confidence that whoever wins will bring back the draft constitution and replace this current 1997 constitution. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I hope I'm back now.
Proceed, Dr. Lamine. Yes, thank you very much. Proceed, Dr. Lamine. I wish just to thank the Honorable Minister for his very clear and comprehensive responses to all the queries. You have the floor, Dr. Lamine.
Splendid. My apologies for jumping ahead of you before thanking the Minister. But as he had indicated, yes, we are almost there. I can't give you days in which we would, the number of days in which we would finish our report. But I'm just coming from, before this meeting, coming from a retreat. And we're in the last days of that retreat. I'm putting the final touches on the report. The 16 volumes comprising the entire report almost finished. It was the 16th volume that we were finishing when I left to come to this meeting. But just to indicate that the categories of recommendations that we worked on, basically about 8 or so. Legal and institutional reforms basket, repeal of draconian laws and decrees, infrastructural enhancement basket as well. These are baskets where we are putting recommendations in. I can't give you at the moment how many recommendations are in these boxes. Capacity building, training basket, ban from public service for individuals who have carried the greatest responsibility for the violations of human rights and the abuses. Further investigations, basket, perhaps with a view to prosecuting, and of course some of the prosecutions basket. Individuals who, under the terms of the Act, bear the greatest responsibility for these violations. We have categorized these recommendations to make it easy for the government to follow them. The work is going on all right. I said, yes, we apologize about the delays, but we are almost there. And if I just may conclude with my wonderful colleague, Oscar, wish him all the best. He is a quintessential international civil servant. We have been, in the language of words of our late colleague, Brian Urquhart, laborers in the same vineyard. He had our paths across in several areas. The last time was when former Secretary General was the Arab League and UN envoy for Syria. And I was Anand's chief of staff. Oscar was coming back and forth to Geneva to come and rescue us on that project. But Oscar, all the best, a great civil servant. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lamine, for this very wonderful conclusion and concluding remarks and responses as well to previous comments and queries raised by member states. What remains for me as chair is to thank all of you for a very rich briefing session, to thank on your behalf the Honorable Minister Dauda Jallo and Dr. Lamine and SRSG, Salah Al-Nadif and Tabu Sar, our sister, President of the Gender Platform, for a very rich briefing session indeed. A lot has been said. This is, I would qualify, a success story as elaborated by Oscar during his intervention and remarks. We see work in progress in the right course. We see a country in the right course, doing and giving us a very wonderful module for reconciliation and how to safely cruise into transition by resorting to those techniques of truth and reconciliation. We see solid support from the international community. We see solid support from the Peace Building Family, Peace Building Commission, the Peace Building Fund. We see electoral process that appears to be in place, and Ambassador Lang, you should take pride for all those successes. as the PR of Gambia, and truly all the government in Gambia and the president should deserve a lot of credit for the successes we have been seeing. And of course, we will celebrate when everything is in the right course and we see Gambia fully culminating that challenging transition with also the success and so on. What we have listened to and so on is extremely encouraging, extremely promising, and of course our brothers and sisters in Gambia merits continued support and commitment from the international partners, development partners, the Peace Building Commission, and so on. We'll try to reflect what we have been saying and listening to and so on in Chair's summary that we will share. We will work, of course, in tandem with the PBSO to produce something accurate and reflective of what we have been saying and stating today. I thank all of you. And of course, a last word to try very modestly and quickly to bid farewell to a great international civil servant. ASG Oscar Fernandez Tranco is one of the best I have seen in my journey in the multilateral system. I have known him for more than 10 years. He has always been extremely efficient, extremely wise, extremely supportive, a great team leader, and always working to build consensus. He was a true bridge builder, I have to say. You know, we're suffering from polarization here and there, developed were in one camp and developing on the other, or the politicization that we see here and there. But Oscar all of the time was giving us great inputs for us to safely cruise collectively and so on. And that's why we have seen recently the peace building having a lot of successes and so on. When you have a look at the new agenda for peace, he's one of the intellects that have made that possible and so on. Rest assured, ASG, Oscar, you're not retiring. You saw in that business, and you're not. It is not a retirement age. It's just phasing out from one stage to the other one. I'm pretty confident the international community will find the right means to keep resorting to your very rich experience and so on, be it in the UN or the international civil society or governments as well and so on. You will always have supporters and a very strong lobby in the UN family in general. This is what I wanted to say. On your behalf, I would have to say by default. And I give you a lasting opportunity, Oscar, if you wish to say something before we conclude. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Osama. Just a very big shukran. Thank you all for what has been a tremendous collaboration. And this is the success of all of us working hand in hand together to make this instrument of peace and peace building and promoting national inclusive ownership of peace building processes. It has been an amazing journey, and I just encourage many more such meetings. I thought today was a stellar example of how thorough, how deep, how substantive, and how important these discussions are, because they also serve as role models for other member states who can learn a lot from this very rich experience that the Gambian colleagues today were able to share with us in this manner. So thank you very much to you, Mr. Chair, to all the former chairs and all the former and current members of the Peace Building Commission. This has been a joint venture, and on behalf of my team here in PBSO, to thank you for this seamless partnership. Thank you.
You're muted, Chair.
Thank you very much. I wish to bring this wonderful meeting to a closure by another word of applause and thanks to the Honorable Minister, the Honorable Dr. Lamin Saar, and all the distinguished briefers, our brother Lang, and all the distinguished ambassadors who have catered to be with us, and all the distinguished DPRs and experts as well. Thank you very much. This meeting is closed. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you, Ambassador.
Thank you, everyone.
Great work, my brother. Thank you very much.
God bless you.
Thank you.
Thank you.